Have you ever been punished simply for wanting dignity, for daring to breathe the same air as those who call themselves your masters? What you are about to hear may shock you. In the shadow of the British Crown, freedom is treated like contraband. Poor farmers are mocked for their rough hands. Children are pushed aside in the marketplace. Women toil beneath cruel taxes. And the elderly, who once carved these lands from wilderness, are stepped over like dirt beneath polished British boots. Humiliation, betrayal, control. The English officers drink fine wine while patriots starve. They laugh at our struggle. They believe we are weak, powerless, but they do not know the fire that smolders inside the heart of a patriot, a fire that refuses to die. Stay with me until the end, because deep in the rugged backcountry, where the mountains claw at the heavens, two souls endure injustice that would break most men. A blind woman who stitches hope into every thread. A young man crippled in body but unbroken in spirit. They are treated as less than human, yet their courage may prove greater than any king's decree. This is where humiliation meets destiny, where sacrifice turns into defiance, where the forgotten rise.
Welcome, my fellow patriots. From which city are you watching today? Check if you're already subscribed. Give this video a like. And now, let's begin our story.
The order traveled like poison in the wind, carrying cruelty straight toward Hawk's Hollow. Redgrave's lips curled when he spat the word rebels, as though simple folk, farmers, widows, laborers, were pests to be hunted. Captain Crow's pale face twisted into that macabre laugh of his, sharp as a blade scraping bone. To them, patriots were not human. They were obstacles, dirt, a reminder that their empire could be defied. Ephraim Black, called the Shade because death seemed to follow wherever he rode, accepted the task with a hollow nod. No loyalty, no conscience, only coin. Behind him, two British riders cracked their whips, eager to deliver humiliation disguised as law. Their boots shone with stolen wealth. Their hearts were colder than Winter Creek water. Agnes, Whitlow felt the shift before any hoofbeats reached the ridge, a prickle of dread. She paused her needle, fabric trembling between her fingers. "Josiah," she whispered, turning her sightless eyes to the cabin door. "Something wicked is coming." Josiah carved in silence near the hearth, shaping a tiny liberty tree from hickory. His leg ached like fire when fear crept in, yet he stood anyway. He was tired of shame, tired of being seen as broken. "Let them come," he said, voice shaking but sure. "We don't bow." In town, Crow mocked the poor who dared glance at him. A hungry boy brushed past, and the captain shoved him into the mud, boots grinding the child's pride into the street. Redgrave toasted to law and order, blind to the suffering he authored. They believed pain would silence defiance. They expected submission, yet rebellion grows strongest where dignity is denied. The riders reached Hawk's Hollow by dusk, the last light bleeding red behind the peaks. Chickens scattered. Dogs barked, then fell silent. Agnes stood in the doorway, frail yet unyielding. Josiah gripped his crude crutch tight, breath shallow. Fear pressed against them, but they refused to let oppression rule their souls. Ephraim dismounted slowly. His boots sank into the cold earth like roots of corruption. "By order of Lord Redgrave," he announced, voice flat, "you will serve as example." Josiah's jaw tightened. "We are not your property." A backhanded strike knocked him into the dirt before he finished. Breathing. Pain shot through his twisted leg, but rage burned hotter. The soldiers laughed, a cruel chorus echoing across the hollow. Agnes reached for her nephew, hands trembling, yet she placed herself between him and the boots that aimed to crush his spirit. "Shame on you," she said, not seeing their faces but knowing their hearts. "You fear those who cannot even stand straight." Crow would have sneered, Redgrave would have scoffed, but Ephraim hesitated. For a heartbeat he saw not. Rebels, only people refusing to break. That brief hesitation fueled Josiah's resolve. Humiliation had shaped him, but it would no longer define him. Inside his chest, independence sparked. Somewhere beyond those mountains, Bill Carter fought for the same liberty, and soon his enemies would learn that even the smallest flame can start a blaze that devours tyrants. A decision was forming, a transformation unfolding. The hidden truth that ordinary patriots could reshape destiny was ready to surface. The night held its breath, knowing what came next would change everything. Comment, I stand with the Patriots. The Liberty Tree shattered beneath Ephraim's heel. Splinters of hope crushed into the dirt. Josiah lunged forward, but his weakened leg betrayed him, sending him crawling on cold earth. The soldiers jeered, circling him like wolves. "Rebel trash!" one spat. Another nudged him with his boot, forcing his face into the mud. Disgrace, contempt, insult. The British made shame into a weapon. Inside the cabin, Agnes stood frozen, fingers digging into the rough wood of the doorframe. Sightless eyes lifted to the ceiling as if heaven might intervene. But heaven felt distant, silent. The air carried only cruelty. Ephraim picked up one of Josiah's carvings, a saint protecting the innocent, a symbol of dignity. With a single swing of his rifle's stock, the carving exploded. The sound hurt more than the impact itself. It was like crushing prayer, like murdering faith. Josiah choked back tears. "Leave my aunt, she's blind!" His voice cracked under the weight of fear and fury. The shade laughed, a dead, hollow sound. He struck Josiah's good leg. Bone screamed louder than flesh. The first crack turned Josiah's cry into a ragged gasp. The second broke something deeper than body. The third shattered his world. Agnes heard each blow, heard her boy's spirit being tested. She tried to move, but terror chained her feet. "Take me instead," she pleaded, voice trembling. "Have mercy." Mercy was a stranger here. One soldier grabbed her by the arm and dragged her into the yard. Agnes stumbled, reaching out to protect Josiah's shattered form. The night smelled of iron and suffering. "Your kin thinks he's a patriot," Ephraim sneered. "He'll learn his place." He sliced a thin line across Josiah's cheek, letting blood tell its story. Red on pale skin, oppression marking independence. Agnes knelt beside him, her palms on his face, desperate to anchor him to life. "Hold on, my child," she whispered. "Darkness cannot kill the rising dawn." The soldiers turned their attention to the cabin. Kicks and laughter echoed as they tossed furniture, ripped quilts, shattered cookware. Every crash another declaration. You have no dignity, no home, no worth. They found a small wooden chest under Agnes's cot, letters sealed with wax. Crow's insignia broken. Bill Carter's handwriting sharp as gunpowder. Proof of rebellion. Proof that these two poor souls dared to love liberty. "This is the real crime," Ephraim growled. "Patriot blood." He threw the letters into the dirt, grinding them into the mud until words vanished. When oppression destroys language, it hopes to erase memory. But rebellion grows in silence. The riders mounted again, leaving destruction behind like a stain on the land. They didn't look back. Why would they? In their minds, they had won. They had proven dominance, humiliated the weak, reinforced the Crown's claim that some lives were worth less than their polished boots. Yet, as hooves faded into darkness, the truth remained. Humiliation can ignite transformation. Shame can forge courage. The boy bleeding in the dust was no longer merely the blind woman's nephew. He was a spark, small but impossibly fierce. Agnes held him close, rocking him gently despite his fractures. The mountains loomed above, ancient witnesses to tyranny and resistance. Somewhere out there, Bill Carter fought for justice. But now justice would come here too, because dignity never stays dead. Night deepened. A crossroads formed in the quiet, submission or uprising. fear or defiance, pain or purpose. Josiah's breath steadied. His hand found Agnes's. His journey had begun. The mountains watched in grim silence as night drained into a cold grey dawn. Frost clung to shattered wood and trampled soil. The British had left nothing untouched, except the courage they meant to kill. Agnes sat in the wrecked yard, her hands slick with her nephew's drying blood. She could not see the ruin, yet she felt every broken thing as if her fingertips could read the story of disgrace carved into their homestead. Josiah's breath fluttered, shallow as a candle in the wind. His leg twisted unnaturally, bones splintered by tyranny. Agnes held his face against her heart, murmuring his name like a fragile prayer. Each whisper carried a promise. Liberty will not die here. Hoofbeats approached, slow and cautious. Cheever Pike, the pack trader, halted when he saw the scene. Blind aunt, broken boy, cabin gutted by contempt. His voice caught in his throat. Oppression had visited this place like plague. Agnes turned her head slightly, reading his presence by the shift in the air. "Burn it," she said, each word scraped from grief. "Let the fire speak." Cheever understood. A torch could shout louder than any tongue. Flames could deliver revelations faster than a messenger ever could. He worked quickly, wrapping Josiah in his travel cloak, lifting him with arms, hardened by frontier miles. Josiah groaned, agony tearing through him, but the sound meant he still fought, still lived. Agnes's fingers found Cheever's sleeve. "Lead me," she whispered, blind yet unbroken. He guided her to a tiny spring where she washed blood from her hands, though no water could cleanse the memory. The cabin door creaked as Cheever set a spark. Dry timber caught at once. Fire crawled upward, devouring the roof that once sheltered love and faith. Smoke twisted into the sky like a banner of defiance, red, black, and righteous. Agnes listened to the crackle of destruction. Every pop of timber sounded like a verdict on the British crown. They thought shame would silence patriots. Instead, they lit rebellion. Her home burned not from surrender, but from decision, from transformation, from the hidden truth that no tyrant can crush the soul of a people ready to rise. Independence grows fiercest in ruin. Cheever strapped Josiah to his mule with gentle precision, careful not to worsen the fractures. "We ride to the hills," he said, "to your kin." Bill Carter's name did not need to be spoken. It hovered in the air, heavy as a musket and twice as dangerous. Bill, a man who had already tasted the bitter kiss of British arrogance, would not let this outrage go unanswered. Agnes clutched the saddle horn as Cheever helped her mount behind him. She could not see the path ahead, but her resolve was bright as wildfire. They travelled beneath the Blue Ridge, shadows long and sharp. Pines whispered of rebellion. Rivers carried the rumour of oppression upstream. Every mile drew them closer to a reckoning. Josiah drifted in and out of awareness, tasting blood and smoke, remembering Ephraim's laughter, the sound of chains tightening. Shame tried to take root, but dignity strangled it. He would rise. He must, because their suffering meant something larger than one broken boy. Agnes leaned forward, lips near his ear. "What they did to you will awaken others," she breathed. "Humiliation breeds heroes." And in her blind darkness she saw clearer than any sighted soul. The journey ahead would reshape him. Pain would forge purpose. Sacrifice would unearth power. Betrayal would call justice from the hills. As they ascended into the mountains, the smoke from the burning cabin curled along the ridges, a signal visible for miles. Somewhere up there, Bill Carter would see it. Somewhere up there, the flame of resistance already smouldered in hidden camps, in whispered vows, in hands tightening around hunting rifles. British boots had crushed a liberty tree, but they had also planted a forest of fury, and when that fury finally erupted, kings would tremble. Smoke from the burned cabin had not yet thinned when Cheever Pike reached the hidden camp above the Crooked Pine Tavern. There, Bill Carter stood like an oak carved out of stubborn earth. Broad shoulders, sun-marked skin, jaw set against despair. His hat pressed to his chest, dark eyes fixed on the pack traders, trembling lips. Cheever's voice faltered as he told of Agnes's cries, of Josiah's bones crushed for daring to love liberty. Bill never blinked, but in his stillness a storm gathered, quiet, deadly, righteous. Around the fire sat Ezekiel Boone, all scars and silence, Thomas Hart with a temper like gunpowder, and Abigail Finch, a widow whose faith was a blade sharpened by grief. They listened too, each breath heavier than the last. Abigail covered her mouth, eyes blazing with motherly fury at the shame inflicted upon the helpless. They wield disgrace as if God granted them the right, she murmured. Bill placed a hand on her shoulder, steady as bedrock. Freedom isn't charity, he said, voice low as distant thunder. It's debt, and Redgrave will pay what he owes. No roar, no bluster, just a man stating truth as fact. Agnes was brought to the camp's edge, her blind eyes lifted as if sensing Bill before he spoke. His boots crunched toward her. He knelt and guided her trembling hands to his face so she could know his presence. "Sister," he whispered, the word reverent, "your suffering is a summons." She nodded, breath hitching. "He wanted me to hear the lesson," she said. "Then let the crown hear ours," Bill replied. Josiah lay wrapped in blankets by the fire, his body broken but his spirit refusing to bow. When he woke, pain shuddered through him, yet he reached out, fingers curling into Bill's sleeve. "Am I still a patriot?" he asked, fear and hope wrestling in his voice. Bill leaned close. "Patriot isn't what you stand on," he said. "It's what you stand for." In that moment, Josiah's humiliation transformed into purpose. The blind and the crippled, targets of contempt, had become symbols of resistance. The camp moved with quiet precision. Thomas headed toward the tavern to spill ale and gather secrets. Ezekiel slipped into the timber, eyes set on the road where Redgrave's riders swaggered through the valley like they owned every soul beneath the flag. Abigail spread blankets, cleaned wounds, whispering scripture that sounded more like a vow than comfort. Bill walked alone into the trees. The crooked pine towered above him, an ancient sentinel twisted by storms yet unbroken. Beneath those gnarled branches, he removed his hat and pressed it to his heart. He thought of children shoved aside by boots polished with stolen pride, of farmers whipped for asking fair price, of redcoat laughter drowning the cries of the innocent. Betrayal had eaten long enough. Dishonor had been fed fat by the blood of the humble. Bill's jaw tightened. He looked toward the east, toward the county seat where Lord Silas Redgrave and Captain Crow counted themselves kings. No more crawling, he vowed. No more shame. He planted the edge of his hunting knife into the soil, as if staking claim to the very ground. This ridge will rise. The oppressed will answer. He returned to the fire and lifted Josiah's hand. "Your journey is not done," he told him. "It has just begun." The fire's glow flickered across their determined faces, faces of the forgotten who had discovered their worth. Sacrifice would be asked, blood would be shed, but liberty demanded resolve. Far below, British riders laughed on their way back to Redgrave's manor, unaware that they had awakened something ancient in the hills, rebellion born from ashes and agony. Agnes lifted her chin, listening not to footsteps of oppressors, but to the heartbeat of patriots preparing to strike. The final breath of Empire's comfort was about to be taken. A storm was coming for the crown, and Bill Carter would lead it. Thomas Hart nearly tore the tavern apart, searching for truth, digging through spilled ale, careless ash, and the arrogance that British men left behind like a stink. His fists found what pride had tried to burn. A letter curled in the hearth's trash, its edges blackened, but its cruelty perfectly preserved. "Strike the boy, spare the blind, let sound be witness. S.R. Redgrave's own hand." Signed betrayal, written disgust, a command that turned humiliation into policy. Thomas tucked the letter inside his coat like a loaded pistol. He returned to camp as Ezekiel Boone emerged from the timber, breath clouding in the cold. 15 of them, he muttered, redcoats and mercenaries alike, boasting in town, drunk on stolen comfort. They ride for the manor at first light. Bill Carter absorbed every word, every insult carried on those boots. Oppression strutted boldly in daylight, believing that the common folk born of this land would always kneel. Abigail Finch guided Agnes closer to the fire. The blind woman unfolded her tactile map, stitched memory into deerskin. Her fingers glided across the hills, tracing ravines and ridges sighted men forgot. "Here," she whispered, "Widow's Neck. Only one horse passes at a time. Stone rises sharp as truth." Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. Trauma had not taken purpose, only heightened it. Bill studied the terrain by lamplight. Widow's Neck, a gorge where the mountains squeezed the road into a single-file confession, a place where arrogance could be cornered, a passage that could become a judgment. His thumb brushed the hilt of his long knife. "They mocked dignity," he said softly. "Now they'll answer to the land itself." Josiah, bandaged and fevered, forced himself upright. Pain rippled across his face, yet his jaw clenched with new resolve. "Let me go with you," he rasped. Bill knelt and placed a hand over the boy's heart. "You already ride with us," he said. "Your courage leads the way." Not pity, pride. Agnes tilted her head, listening to the silent decisions being formed. "Do not end their lives in blind wrath," she murmured. "Show them why liberty rises." Bill nodded, not from agreement alone, but reverence. She had suffered disgrace and yet demanded justice over vengeance. The blind seamstress could see further than any general. Thomas laid the letter beside the map, proof of calculated cruelty. A revelation that Redgrave's hatred had strategy, not drunken impulse. Abigail's eyes narrowed. "He wants terror," she said. "Then let him taste it himself." Her scripture no longer sounded like comfort. It was prophecy. Night deepened, cloaking the ridge in shadow. Bill divided tasks with simple words, no bravado. Ezekiel would cover the high ledge. Thomas would take the narrow bend. Bill would stand in the gorge's throat, unseen until the hour of reckoning. Cartridge belts were tightened, flint checked, powder kept dry. Every small action a declaration. Independence will not kneel. Josiah lay back, eyes burning with a warrior's shame turned into purpose. His knife, broken in the attack, rested beside him. Abigail lifted it, wrapped in cloth. "We mend what tyrants break," she said, placing it gently at his side. His journey was not over. Pain would not silence him. Insult would not define him. Above them, the crooked pine bent in the wind, old and twisted, yet unyielding, like a patriot refusing to bow. Bill gathered his rifle and hat, then looked toward the dark trail leading to Widow's Neck. Every step ahead was sacrifice, every breath rebellion, every heartbeat a drumbeat of the coming storm. Redgrave and Crow believed the backcountry was weak. Tonight, the hills would teach them who truly owned this soil, and when the first hoof struck the gorge at dawn, the jaws of the mountain would close. Right, the flame of freedom lives in me. Midnight cloaked the county seat like a burial shroud. No moon dared witness what righteousness prepared in the dark. Bill Carter and his 3 loyal shadows slipped through thorn and shadow, guided by vengeance, sharpened into justice. They carried no arrogance, only the quiet certainty that liberty demanded risk. Abigail and Thomas crept along Redgrave's paddock, blades whispering as they cut the horses' tie lines. One flick of steel, and every mount was freedom-bound. Ezekiel moved toward the granary, coating wood with lantern oil, each drop a promise that humiliation would no longer go unchallenged. Bill advanced alone toward the manor, that swollen monument to stolen taxes. Windows glowed with gluttony and wine. Laughter inside, English laughter, reeked of contempt. He ghosted to the kitchen wall, slipped through a coal window, loosened by neglect. Inside, silver gleamed atop embroidered cloth while commoners outside starved. Bill kept to the shadows, knowing his presence here was a message, not a massacre. He reached Redgrave's study. The room smelled of tobacco and cruelty. On the desk, inked orders waited to birth new suffering at dawn. Bill placed the charred letter upon them, proof of betrayal, signed with malice. Then he pinned it down with a carving Josiah once gave him, an eagle mid-scream, liberty in miniature, wings spread against oppression, a child's hope weaponized into a warning. Bill stepped back, breath steady, let Redgrave read his own sins when the firelight reached this room. Outside, a flame flickered, then another. The granary erupted into hungry blaze. Sparks climbed into the night, painting the sky with rebellion. Bells tolled in panic, metal crying out that dignity had come for its debt. Captain Crow burst from the barracks, pale face twisted, that perverse laugh scraping the air as he cursed drunken soldiers into formation. Boots stumbled, muskets fumbled. Fear replaced the smug superiority they wore like uniforms. Ezekiel melted into the timber before any bullet could find him. Abigail and Thomas vanished into brush, their work complete. Not a single patriot lingered near the manor walls. Bill slipped through the smoke, low and silent as a war prayer. The British scrambled to control the chaos they had authored, shouting orders over the roar of righteous fire. They never saw the Patriots return to the safety of the trees, never sensed that justice had already set its plan in motion. Back at Widow's Neck, the gorge lay carved between cliffs, stone jaws ready to close. Bill's trio rejoined Josiah and Agnes before dawn, breath thick with resolve. Agnes reached out, fingertips brushing Bill's sleeve. "You lit the warning," she whispered. Bill answered only with a nod, every word saved for the moment that truly mattered. Josiah clutched his mended knife. His body was weak, but his spirit stood taller than mountains. Shame no longer chained him. The struggle had transformed him. He did not see himself as a boy broken by tyranny, but as a patriot forged by pain. Redgrave thought he silenced rebellion by breaking bone. Instead, he awakened revelation. Bill studied the horizon, the first pale line of morning cutting across the ridge. Soon, hoofbeats would echo through the gorge. The enemy would arrive proud, loud, certain of their dominance. They would ride straight into the crosshairs of consequence. The land held its breath. Sacrifice was inevitable. Justice demanded a price. And every patriot there was ready to pay. It, not in disgrace, but in honor. Dawn neared. Widow's Neck waited. Grey dawn bled into the gorge like a dying thing. Widow's Neck stood narrow as a noose, stone walls rising so tight that breath itself felt trapped. Redgrave rode at the center of his mounted pride, black coat draped like a lord's shadow, chin lifted as if the very air owed him obedience. Captain Crow flanked him, pale face stretched into that sick smile, mockery forged into flesh. The insult of the night before had only sharpened his hunger for domination. Behind them, 5 mounted soldiers smirked, trading disgusted laughter about provincial swine who dared inconvenience the crown. They believed this valley belonged to them. Bill Carter's voice rolled from the heights, calm as judgment, cold as steel. "You wrote the letter, Silas. Now read our answer." Silence struck like a fist. Then 2 shots split the air, clear, merciless. The rear guards toppled from their saddles, blood soaking the dusty dawn. Horses screamed, hooves scraping uselessly against rock. The gorge had teeth. Panic flickered in Redgrave's aristocratic eyes. He twisted in the saddle, suddenly understanding he was prey. Bill and Ezekiel dropped from the ridge like hunters born from the mountain itself, rifles leveled, cutting off retreat. Thomas Hart ghosted into place above, rifle aimed steady, sealing the tail. There was no escape now, not through stone that rose like judgment, nor through the resolve of patriots ready to reclaim their dignity. Crow reached for his pistol, too slow. Abigail Finch's shot rang out, precise as scripture. His hand exploded into gore, fingers scattering like broken lies. That laugh, his cruel, perverse signature, died in a strangled gasp. He stared at the ruin of his palm, face contorting not with pain, but disbelief that a woman, a mere colonial widow, dared strip him of command. "You mock the weak," Abigail called down, voice sharp as a verdict. "Behold the strength you birthed." Redgrave tried to muster that noble sneer, tried to raise his voice like a whip, but fear choked the breath in his throat. "You are rabble," he spat, though the word trembled. "You are nothing." Bill stepped forward, rifle aimed square at the heart that beat behind the velvet. "We are patriots," he said, "and we are done crawling." He motioned to Ezekiel, who dragged the charred letter from his coat and threw it into the dust before Redgrave's boots. "You ordered shame," Bill continued, "thinking humiliation would keep us low. Instead, you taught us what we're worth." Crow snarled, clutching his mangled hand. "Rebellion is treason," he hissed. "Your blood will feed the crows." Josiah's knife flashed from where he lay, hidden near the rocks, voice raw but filled with fire. "Then let the birds feast on tyrants first." His broken body no longer symbolized defeat, only transformation. Redgrave scowled, desperation leaking into his polished arrogance. "You think yourselves heroes," he said, "but the crown will crush every last one of you." Bill's eyes narrowed. "Maybe so, but not before we teach them that even poor farmers, blind women, and crippled boys hold more courage than any empire built on chains." The soldiers shifted, trapped between cliffs and patriots who saw truth clearer than any king. The humiliation they had used as a weapon now recoiled, shame becoming the spark of liberation. Dignity swelled in the narrow space, stronger than muskets or medals. Ezekiel cocked his rifle. Thomas steadied his aim. Abigail's finger hovered at the trigger, ready to end the beast that laughed at suffering. Bill raised a hand, not to stop justice, but to shape it. "They will face judgment," he said, voice low, final, "but they will know why." The gorge fell silent, holding its breath, waiting for a choice that would echo far beyond these mountains. Redgrave's horse snorted, sensing its master's terror before Redgrave himself allowed fear to show. Bill's command hung heavy in the cold air. "On your knees." The loyalist magnate hesitated, but the sight of 3 rifles and Ezekiel's knife glinting at his throat shattered his pride. He slid from the saddle, boots scraping rock, the posture of a man dragged down to where he always believed others belonged. Dust clung to his fine coat, dignity stripped bare. Bill unfolded the burned-edge letter and read each line, letting every poisoned syllable echo back at its author. "Strike the boy, spare the blind, let sound be witness." Redgrave flinched as if stabbed by his own ink. Josiah's suffering, once a game to him, now darkened the gorge like a storm cloud crushing sky. "This is your handwriting," Bill said. "Your disgrace." The word disgrace cracked louder than any bullet. He held up Josiah's carving, the eagle mid-scream, not a toy, a symbol, its wings blackened by smoke, but still spread wide. Unbroken, the Patriots saw not a decoration, but a revelation. Liberty survives flame. Bill tied Redgrave to his own saddle, leather, biting noble wrists unused to hardship. The horse stepped forward, dragging the man across unforgiving stone until his arrogance bled. Not enough to kill, just enough for him to taste the degradation he served so easily to the weak. When Redgrave's breath came ragged and desperate, Bill halted the horse beneath a white oak, its broad limb arched over Widow's neck like a waiting gallows. "This isn't vengeance," Bill said. "This is a ledger. You wrote the debt. We collect." His voice held no triumph, only truth honed to a blade. The rope tightened. Redgrave's eyes widened, finally recognizing that those he called animals now held his life between two fingers. Crow watched, pale and deflated, cradling the ruin of his once commanding hand. He had mocked others' pain. Now shame soaked him like cold rain. His laugh, the one that haunted the suffering of the poor, was gone, replaced by silence that begged mercy he had never shown. Abigail stepped closer, her widow's resolve carved into granite. "Remember every soul you took," she whispered, "every back you broke, every tear you mocked." Her words stripped away his excuses, leaving him naked with guilt. Ezekiel stood guard, rifle steady, eyes fixed with the judgment of a man who'd buried too many friends because of king-court hunger and forced tax. Thomas kept his aim on the rear soldier who still lived, the man trembling, helmet shaking like a rattled cup, arrogance gone as quickly as a candle in wind. Josiah lay propped against stone, breath shallow, but his gaze was fire. This scene was his hidden truth made visible, that a crippled patriot could bring tyrants to their knees. Liberty did not need perfect bodies, only unbroken souls. Redgrave groaned, sweat dripping from his brow, pride drowning. His voice cracked into fragments. "You are savages." Bill leaned close, hat still held to his chest. "No, we are the freeborn." His words hit harder than any fist. "You tried to silence us with shame. You gave us suffering as chains. Instead, we found purpose." The rope drew tighter. Crow swallowed hard, trembling. For the first time he understood that humiliation can carve wounds no sword can mend, that dignity denied will eventually rise with fangs. A wind swept through the gorge, cold as prophecy. The white oak creaked. The soldiers stared at the patriots as if seeing them for the first time, ordinary people transformed into the authors of destiny. The limb held the weight. Every heartbeat waited for the next choice. The journey toward independence had crossed a line. There was no turning back, only justice, bleeding forward. Bill removed the wooden eagle from Redgrave's stiffened coat and held it for a moment longer. Smoke-darkened wings, carved by hands that once trembled through insult and agony, now symbolized defiance that even death could not silence. He pinned the message beneath it. "This is the price for mocking the blind and butchering the lame. We are not subjects. We are patriots." The remaining soldiers trembled, fear erasing every ounce of arrogance they once carried like armor. Bill pointed toward the open road. "Run!" he ordered. "Let London learn what dignity sounds like." Hooves thundered in retreat, the sound of a crown retreating from a people it believed too broken to fight. Then the ridge fell quiet. Not peace, justice waiting for the next breath. Bill rode back toward the ruins of the Whitlow home, the ashes still warm with the last shreds of a simple life. Agnes stepped forward, guided by her fingers along the edge of the doorframe that no longer stood. She found his face through touch alone, reading the truth there. "Is my boy at peace?" she asked, voice thin but unbroken. Bill lifted his hat from his head, that silent salute only the honorable deserve. "Yes, ma'am," he whispered, "and your name will never be spoken with pity again, only with honor." Agnes turned her face toward the mountains, where the wind carried the memory of Josiah's courage. Her tears didn't fall for defeat. They fell for rebirth. In that hush, the pines whispered through their needles, freedom, independence, dignity, words the British could burn on paper but never strip from the human heart. Widow's Neck would no longer be a place of fear. It had become a landmark of rebellion, where ordinary souls proved that the weak are only weak until they decide to rise. Bill Carter looked down at the wooden eagle in his palm. One boy's dream. A wounded artist's cry for independence. The spark that set fire to a tyranny smug in its redcoat certainty. The carving belonged to Agnes now. She cradled it as though holding the very spirit of this land. "His journey lit the path for others," she said. Bill nodded. "Because liberty is carried forward by sacrifice, and every patriot must choose the moment they decide to stand straight, even when their body tries to fold." Night crept across the ridge. Torches glimmered like stars fallen to earth, small flames, but fierce, enough to wake a nation. The struggle was not finished. The road ahead would demand more blood, more courage, more names carved into the memory of a new world. But these hills had spoken. The backcountry would bow no more. If this story of dignity, of rebellion forged by love and loss, reached your heart, stay with us. There are many more patriots whose courage must be remembered. Your voice, your presence, helps keep their flame burning strong. Leave a like and subscribe if these sacrifices should never be forgotten.